It's good to speak with you, sir, as we head into a weekend with more madness in the house. George Santos is fired, and we don't know where we're going next. Only here on Sound On. This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 2:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Stocks are higher. Oil is extending declines amid expectations that the OPEC Plus output cuts announced yesterday will do little to tighten the market. Right now, we've got West Texas Intermediate crude trading down by 2.2%, 74.27 right now for a barrel of WTI. Sticking with commodities, spot gold now up $34 the ounce at $2,070. That is an advance of 1.7%. Bitcoin Bitcoin up 2.5% right now, 38,691 on Bitcoin. Stocks higher across the board, holding on to gains here. S&P 500 index up 21. That is a gain of 0.5%. The Dow up 253 points, up 0.7%. Nasdaq up 52. That is a gain of 0.4%. The outperformer by far, Russell 2000 index of small cap shares. The Russell 2000 is advancing now by about 2.4%. We've got the 10-year yielding right now 4.21%. The 2-year 4.55% on the 2-year. Pfizer shares down 4.8%. Pfizer is dropping development of an experimental weight loss pill due to side effects that include nausea and vomiting. It is a blow to the drug maker's efforts to find new avenues for growth. Again, recapping, stocks higher. S&P now up 22 points, up 0.5%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Sound On with Joe Matthew on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, if you managed to recover from our conversation with Denver Riggleman, you may be wondering how we survived this, having seen the expulsion of George Santos and no clue now of what exactly is going to happen with funding the government, helping our allies who are in hot wars, securing the border. Quite the situation in Washington, D.C. I'm Joe Matthew in New York. I have fled the Capitol. I will return. But you know who's still there right now? Two of Bloomberg's best. I'm glad to say Laura Davison and Gregory Cordy are with us in our Bloomberg Washington studio. I'm sure both recovering from what's already happened. Great to have you both here. Laura, I'm going to start with you on what we saw today in the House, just to take a quick swing on this here. I don't suspect it's going to help cats and dogs living together now that George Santos is out. But a lot of Republicans thought it was time to get this done. Are you surprised the leadership did not?
You know, this was really the question going into this morning of, where would leadership fall on this? It's not surprising that they decided not to oust one of their own. Just on a practical level, it means that, they're down a vote when it comes to taking some of these trickier votes. But also, and George Santos even himself kind of said this, that this sets a precedent now. You haven't had members that have been expelled from Congress without a conviction. So this is a brave new world. Obviously, Santos has a lot of evidence stacked against him. So as we saw, a lot of members felt comfortable saying, hey, look, buddy, you're not going to be in Congress anymore.
You had the best line, Gregory Cordy, in your story you wrote with Billy House on this. The only real surprise was that it took so long. What will people think of Speaker Johnson and the rest of the leadership for that very fact?
Yeah, well, obviously this was the third try, and the third try was the charm this time. There were two previous votes to try to expel him that fell short for various procedural and probably substantive reasons. Finally, the ethics report came out, and it was incredibly damning in terms of Santos's personal behavior, his business ethics, his campaign finances, and accused him of stealing, flat out stealing from campaign contributors to put the money into his own pocket and buy luxury goods. It was not a good look by any stretch of the imagination. Yeah. And that's what finally did it. But as Laura indicated, there was some tension up until the moment of the vote, whether that even would be enough to expel a member from Congress. Look, it's the chapter now is closed. We'll see, but we'll see where the standard is now. There are now complaints that other members of Congress sometimes engage in other sort of improprieties. This seemed to be an exception, but at least in this case, Congress was able to police itself. Yeah,
I kind of wonder about that because Santos himself said, you expel me, I'm gonna take some of you with me here because I'm sure he's got dirt on some of his former colleagues. I don't know if we're going to hear from it, what shape that's going to take, Laura, but we've got a major political season that we're walking into here. We're already in the throes of a Republican presidential campaign, and our next debate is next week, and I'd love to hear from you on this as Republicans try to pick essentially a second-place contender to Donald Trump, and it's looking like Chris Christie might not make the stage. Do you suspect this will be the last sanctioned RNC debate, the last chance voters have to see a couple of candidates on stage next week?
That's a big question. So next week will be the fourth debate. On the stage will presumably be Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, and then the kind of question mark around Chris Christie if he will have the polling numbers to make the stage. It's likely that it's going to be a better debate with fewer people on the stage. We saw that last time there were 5 candidates. They actually got to discuss some policy, unlike earlier debates where it was just a complete shouting match and hard for even people who are well versed in politics to even follow what people were saying. But as we've seen, viewership has really fallen off. A lot of voters have found that these debates are not very helpful forums. Particularly, Trump is not there. He's not going to be there this time. I'm unclear if he'll show up to any debates. So that's, as you mentioned earlier, has the RNC thinking, okay, what are other ways we can do? Can we loosen up the rules and allow candidates to participate in unsanctioned debates as a way to get candidates out there because they clearly don't want to play by our rules?
Gregory, you've been covering the campaign very closely. How damaging would it be, if not completely damaging, to Chris Christie's campaign if he can't get on the debate stage next week? Is it over?
The whole theory of his case from the very beginning is that this is a field that's going to have to coalesce. Mm-hmm. He's the only candidate this time that also ran against Trump in 2016. He saw what happened 8 years ago when the field was far too divided and the anti-Trump vote was split too many ways to be effective. He had hoped that the field would consolidate and that he would emerge as the one anti-Trump vote. The problem is, as the field is consolidated, it's only made Trump stronger. Not all of the votes that have gone from the non-Trump candidates have gone to other non-Trump candidates. Some of them Trump is picking up. As Republicans, I think, are maybe have a little bit of fatigue. They're looking to just get this over with. Let's have a nominee. Let's go toe-to-toe against Joe Biden. Mm-hmm. We have Doug Burgum has not made the debate stage. He hasn't dropped out yet. Asa Hutchinson is still in the race. He hasn't been on a debate stage since the first debate. So it's not, as long as, and look, Chris Christie has run a pretty lean campaign. He's focused on New Hampshire. He's polling pretty well there. He's just not polling very well anywhere else. So I would expect him to perhaps stay in, even if he doesn't make this debate stage, because it's his last debate, and at least on the schedule, and there may be other venues for him to make a name for himself.
Well, speaking of coalescing, Gavin Newsom thinks it's time for Ron DeSantis to drop out of the race and give Nikki Haley a chance, as he said last night. I don't know if you guys caught this thing of Gavin Newsom versus Ron DeSantis in a debate just for fun last night on Fox News. Here's the governor of California.
I think it's a question some people are probably asking. I know Nikki Haley's campaign is asking, when are you going to drop out and at least give Nikki Haley a shot to take down Donald Trump in this nomination? She laid you out. Please. You're a walking hypocrite. You're a walking hypocrite.
What about
on
China?
the issue of China?
She laid you out, he said. But there are some Republicans who are going there, Laura, remembering what 2016 was like. If they cannot coalesce around a second place candidate, does Donald Trump already have this in the bag?
That is pretty much what's happening and what's likely to happen unless either Haley or DeSantis have a big surge behind them in the last 6 weeks, really, as we head into voting. You saw this week, Nikki Haley's created some unlikely allies. Gavin Newsom coming out, not really endorsing her, but sort of saying, hey, DeSantis, you should get out of her way. Also, Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, came out and said, hey, Democrats, you should get behind Haley. Right. She's the only chance of beating Trump. Bill Ackman, also a Democratic donor in the past, a billionaire investor, also said that he's looking at Haley. So you have, kind of folks in the center, and even some people who have traditionally supported Democrats giving Haley a good look through.
What do you think about that, Gregory Cordy? I'd love for you to weigh in. I don't think Ron DeSantis is going to do anything like Gavin Newsom is describing, at least not yet. But we could see this field whittle down very quickly after the first 2 states.
Yeah, and as you know, it's all about perception and expectations and momentum, and those are the words that we use to try to create some meta-narrative to explain what's happening in politics. And right now, that narrative is very good for Nikki Haley. If you look at her poll numbers, they've been improving steadily. The narrative is bad for Ron DeSantis. His poll numbers have been deteriorating. The more exposure he gets, the further down they go. And he's been spending a ridiculous amount of money, especially especially on his super PAC side, trying to get him the nomination. Nikki Haley's been running a lean operation and is getting a lot of support with not a lot of money yet. And as Laura just said, some of the big donors are now starting to give her a second look. So it would be interesting to see what she had with some resources. But yeah, we still have, look, nobody has yet voted in Iowa. No one's voted in New Hampshire. We have to go through at least those first two contests to see what the field looks like. And then we're going to Nikki Haley's home state in South Carolina, so that's a bonus for her too. She may be the last woman standing, but it's still pretty hard to see how she can peel off some of those people who now say they support Trump.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's coming up quick. We're going to be in Iowa in just a matter of weeks, followed immediately by New Hampshire. And then it'll be on to South Carolina, of course. And if Nikki Haley can perform well in New Hampshire and close the deal in South Carolina, who knows what that conversation will be like. But we're certainly keeping our minds open here. Great conversation. And thanks to both of you. Laura Davison, Bloomberg Politics editor, with us from Washington, as is Gregory Cordy, Bloomberg Politics reporter, here on the Friday edition of Sound On. I hope you both have a great weekend, and thank you. Let's get you up to date now on world and national news with Nancy Lyons in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington. Hi, Nancy.
Thanks, Joe. The first woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court has died. Sandra Day O'Connor died this morning from complications related to advanced dementia and a respiratory illness. She was 93. She was nominated to be on the court in 1981 by then President Ronald Reagan. And during her confirmation hearing, she was asked her views on abortion.
My own view in the area of abortion is that I am opposed to it as a matter of birth control or otherwise.
O'Connor was confirmed by a unanimous vote. In her early years on the court, she was sharply critical of Roe v. Wade, the ruling that made abortion a fundamental right. O'Connor retired in 2006. Well, the vote has come to expel New York Republican George Santos.
On this vote, the yeas are 311, the nays are 114, with 2 recorded as present. 2/3 voting in the affirmative, the resolution is adopted, and a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
That's House Speaker Mike Johnson announcing results that Santos has been expelled. The governor of New York will now need to call for a special election to fill the position held by former Congressman Santos. He was just the 6th member in the chamber's history to be ousted by his colleagues. His departure creates an open seat in a Democratic-leaning Long Island district and erodes the narrow Republican majority in the House. From expulsion to impeachment, House Republicans are preparing to formally authorize an impeachment inquiry against President Biden as soon as next week. The vote would require all House lawmakers to go on the record as supporting or opposing the impeachment inquiry that conservative Republicans have been pursuing for months. The impeachment inquiry was initiated without a House vote, which has led the White House to say the probe is, quote, lacking constitutional legitimacy. Global news 24 hours a day. I'm Nancy Lyons.
You're listening to Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 2:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Stocks higher. We begin, though, with a headline right off the Bloomberg professional service. Amazon has signed a contract with SpaceX for 3 Falcon 9 launches to support deployment plans for Amazon's low Earth orbit satellite broadband network. Stocks are holding on to gains. It is a Fed Friday, sort of. Wall Street shrugging off Jay Powell's attempt to curb bets on interest rate cuts. Stocks and bonds pushing higher on speculation the Fed will stand pat this month and ease policy in 2024. Equities higher across the board, with the S&P up 257 points right now. That is a gain of 0.7%. The S&P up 23, up by 0.5%. NASDAQ up 64, up 0.5%. NASDAQ 100 index up by about 0.3%. 10-year yield 4.22%, with a 2-year at 4.56%. Spot gold right now is advancing by 1.6%, up another $32 to $2,069. A retreat for crude today. West Texas Intermediate crude is moving lower. We do have WTI trading lower now by 2.4%, 74.23 a barrel on West Texas Intermediate crude. Well, indeed, we did hear from Fed Chair Jay Powell today, and with more, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
Speaking in Atlanta, the Fed chair pushed back against the idea of cutting interest rates during the first half of next year.
It would be premature to conclude with confidence that we have achieved a sufficiently restrictive stance or to speculate on when policy might ease. We are prepared to tighten policy further if it becomes appropriate to do so.
But not this year, it seems, as Powell signaled officials expect to stand pat when they meet later this month. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
And on a day when stocks are moving higher, we do have a couple of high-profile declining tech names. Dell Technologies after earnings down now by 4.4%. Marvell Technology after earnings down now by 5.6%. Recapping, stocks are higher with the S&P up 22, higher by 0.5%. Russell 2000 index of small cap shares surging now by 2.4%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Sound On with Joe Matthew on Bloomberg Radio.
We've had no shortage of breaking news headlines today, not the least of which is news of Sandra Day O'Connor's passing. This is only a couple of hours ago we learned that this trailblazer, former Supreme Court Justice, had died at age 93. It's not what I woke up planning to talk about today with David Weston, but it's something we need to talk about with David, who spent time clerking in the Supreme Court and is no stranger to, of course, the circles surrounding the court. And he's with us right now with me live in New York. What a concept, David Weston, to see you in person.
It's a treat for the city of New York to have you here. Thank you,
that's
Joe.
Right.
It's great to have you here.
To share a studio together. It's been a minute. And we're talking about a trailblazer here and an American icon, aren't we?
So important. I knew her some. She came on the court about 2 or 3 years after I left. But she was a very close confidant of my old boss, Lewis Powell.
Yeah.
He took her under his wing. She'd never had judicial robes before, so she didn't know where to get them.
Amazing.
And they had similar demeanors, similar approaches to judging. They were perceived as centrists. It was that Powell was the swing vote. Sandra Day O'Connor became the swing vote.
Yes.
And they were very intent on doing things incrementally, one step at a time, no big overarching theories. She was also a fine athlete. I mean, golf and tennis. And Justice Powell was something of an athlete, but his wife, Jody, was really an athlete. And they really became very, very close friends. But the main thing is, Joe, she changed the world. She was the first female justice in the Supreme Court.
Right.
And she had to fight her way. She did very well at Stanford Law School and mainly got offers to be a legal secretary afterwards in Arizona, and finally started in a DA's office. And she was a trailblazer for women in the law.
There was no women's room, Jeannie Shanzano mentioned earlier, in the court when she started there.
Worse than that, there was a private dining room that was called the wives' dining room.
Oh, my God.
Because they'd all been men, and so the wives of the justices could come up and use this separately, but they had to change that. And by the way, a year before this happened, it had always been Mr. Justice Powell, Mr. Justice Stewart. They took the Mr. away, anticipating the possibility. So now it's justice. It's not Mr. or Ms. It's justice.
And this is an enormous part of Ronald Reagan's legacy as well.
It is. And she was an extraordinary woman, very reasonable. I must say also, after she left the court, she adopted the subject. And she left the court to take care of her husband, who was ailing with Alzheimer's. But she really became a real spokesperson for civics and teaching civics in our public schools. She was very concerned about where this country was going and that we grew up and didn't understand the basics of what made us the republic that we are.
Did she think she would live to see the end of Roe v. Wade?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, there was a big dispute about that, as you know, because when she was in, by the way, she was the only former legislator at the time on the court. She had been in the state Senate in Arizona, so she had that political experience as well. Wow. She had voted certain ways that were essentially, quote, pro-abortion. She had told Ronald Reagan, when he was talking about nominating her, that she abhorred everything about abortion. He interpreted it as saying she'd vote against it, and in fact, she went exactly the opposite way. But again, like Justice Powell, I think, it was not about whether she thought it was a good idea or not. The question was, what does the Constitution say? Because it's not up to the Supreme Court to decide what they want to have happen. Their job is to really decide what the Constitution says, what the government should decide, as opposed to what individuals should decide.
David Weston spending time with us here, of course, the host of Bloomberg Wall Street Week. I suspect you'll touch on this later on this evening, but you're taking a fascinating look at Mexico right now, and I love this idea of Mexico being the beneficiary of our, you call it what you want, decoupling or diversifying when it comes to China.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the things we all seen. The foreign direct investment into China has really dropped off substantially. President Xi is trying to fix that up some. But at the same time, we had what we saw with the supply chains after COVID, when we realized we were getting all of our medical supplies out of China. And people said, we got to change the supply chain situation. And son of a gun, Mexico's a pretty good alternative to that. And so there's been a real upsurge in investment in there, including in real estate. So we talked to somebody who actually, his company is the largest developer of real estate in the entire country of Mexico. It is Thor Equities. And this is Joe Sitt, who's the founder and chairman. And we talked to him about some of the geopolitical issues, because there was a time people didn't want to invest in Mexico because they were worried about the politics. He thinks that has really turned around. This is what he said.
I really think that Mexico did well in spite of itself. Now, the politics is much better. Either way, we're getting a woman for the first time as the president of Mexico. It'll either be Claudia Sheinbaum or it'll be Xochitl Galvez. Both of them pro-business, listeners, touching their communities and really caring about their constituents at all levels, and not just considering rhetoric to be the answer.
Yeah, that's Joe Sitt, and it is pretty remarkable. I haven't been paying as much attention to it as I should have. The election's coming up in June. Yeah, they're going to have a woman as their president no matter what. Mexico will beat the United States to that point.
Amazing.
And both of them actually seem to be very pro-business. So it's quite an extraordinary, as we talk about Sandra Day O'Connor, there's a big movement going on down in Mexico, actually, for women to really start taking over.
That's remarkable. I love that you're talking about this tonight. Larry Summers, of course, the former Treasury Secretary, speaks with you almost every week. He's going to be on live this week with you. You've got some important things to reflect on with him, too.
Yeah, he was eager to come on to talk about Henry Kissinger, whom he knew well, as well as Charlie Munger, who he knew well. And we had two passings besides Sandra Day O'Connor. It's been quite a week, as you suggest. But he wants to talk about their legacy and what's going on. At the same time, he allows us out. He's got to talk about OpenAI. If you recall, he's now on the board of OpenAI, and he's supposed to be sorting this out. So I'm going to be curious to ask Larry.
Have you talked to him since then? How did this happen?
I've emailed him with him, but we're going to talk about it tonight, because I'm going to say, why did you take the job?
No one's had this
emailed
conversation.
him right after it happened. I said, are you sure about this, Larry? This is a tough job.
Right.
But I said, why'd you take the job? And I'm sure he can't tell us exactly what they're going to do, but at least get a sense of where they're heading. I mean, what sort of board do they want? What does it look like? How many people? What sorts of people are they looking for?
They're really looking for somebody to steady the ship here, though, right? They wanted someone with experience, some gravitas, someone called Larry Summers.
Well, that's my surmise. That's exactly right. When they named Larry, I thought, okay, you got one grown-up. He's been his Treasury Secretary.
No one's had this interview with him since then, though, right? This is going to be the first. This is fascinating.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating.
I hope I didn't bury the lead. We've got Larry Summers coming in, the new board member at OpenAI.
Not at all. But remember, on Wall Street Week, it was about a year ago now, when he first first brought ChatGPT to us, on the air, and he said he thinks that generative AI could be as big as, he said, fire or the wheel. It could be that big.
Are you using ChatGPT?
I have tried it.
Do you do show prep with this? What am I doing? What am I missing here?
Maybe I should. I'd be better if I did it. But I have used it a couple of times. What I've used it for actually is when I've already researched something and then I check and see if I missed anything, right? When we were going overseas and I looked for where to go to restaurants and what events, the experience I had, but maybe I was using it incorrectly, is it told me what I already knew.
Oh, how about that?
I already knew it. So I haven't found it revolutionary yet. But there's a lot of research now, as you know, Joe, that says the way to use it is not to substitute for people, but to augment people. That in fact, if you use it in the workplace, you will be better at what you do. It's just not that you can turn it all over to let it take over. That's what a lot of people are saying.
If you were back at the law firm now, you might be using it to summarize enormous amounts of material that would have taken people from another job to work on. The busy work might be going away.
This gets into the weeds, but when I started as an associate, one of the things we had to do was document review in response to subpoenas. There is nothing more tedious than going through boxes upon boxes upon boxes.
I believe this.
So if I could get a ChatGPT to read through all this and just tell me the ones I need to look at, boy, that would have been a different job.
Great to have time with you. Good to see you, David Weston.
Great to be with you, Joe.
Here live in New York City, the host of Bloomberg Wall Street Week. We'll be watching Larry Summers and a lot more coming up with David, a conversation that we have every week at this time here on Bloomberg Sound On. We're at World Headquarters in New York, something a little special today, even though there has been breaking news in Washington. Indeed, Congressman George Santos has been expelled. The vote took place just a couple of hours ago. Let's listen.
On this vote, the yeas are 311, the nays are 114, with 2 recorded as present. 2/3 voting in the affirmative, the resolution is adopted, and a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The clerk will notify the governor of the state of New York of the action of the House. Under Clause 5D of Rule 20, the chair announces to the House that in light of the expulsion of the gentleman from New York, Mr. Santos, the whole number of the House is now 434.
434, right back where we were 2 weeks ago. George Santos packing his bags now. And look, the Republican leadership did not vote to expel George Santos, and a number of Republican members took that same position, including the congressman from Michigan, who we're going to talk with right now, Bill Huizenga, released the following statement after voting against the expulsion resolution. The top line says it all. Quote, "The accusations against Mr. Santos are very serious and credible, while I find his behavior appalling," the congressman writes. "Every American deserves their day in court." Congressman Bill Huizenga, welcome. Glad you could join us today, sir. What precedent was just set?
Yeah, Joe, thanks for having me. And I think a bad precedent, frankly. As I had indicated in my release, we have not in the modern era ever expelled anybody who has not been convicted of a crime, not accused, not even having a really strong trail. And let's be clear, I don't think George Santos is, let me be charitable, a high quality individual. All right, let's leave it at that. But at the end of the day, I'm afraid that this is a slippery slope to the further and deepening politicization and weaponization of the processes that we've seen here in Washington, D.C. And so, look, we know if you look at individuals like Charlie Rangel and others who have had serious issues, including being, tax fraud in Charlie Rangel's circumstances, they were not removed from office. I believe it is only when the courts have ruled that is when the House should take actions. Otherwise, it's up to the voters in each of those districts.
Well, of course, these allegations were wild when the Ethics Committee report came out. It felt like more than allegations, which I know made a number of members feel like they had no choice. The last line of your statement is one we should read as well, Congressman. You write, "In America, even dirtbags deserve due process." The House could have trouble with dirtbags in office, Congressman. Do you also empathize with the members who wanted him gone?
Yeah, I certainly do, and I understand it. I promised one of my Ethics Committee friends that I would read through the entire report, which I did last night. made notes, made notations in the report. I think it's very credible with what they have accused him of and the evidence that they have and that they're presenting. But it also, they're very clear that there's FBI involvement, there's a Department of Justice, and all of this has to be turned over to the Attorney General as well. And as distasteful as he is, and the actions as distasteful as they are, and very possibly potentially illegal, that needs to rise to such a level. I mean, this is the most serious thing we can do in the House of Representatives, because we have just taken 750,000 people's voice off the voting board. You know, they no longer have their voice being heard in Congress. And that is a very, very serious thing. And I understand. I've had extensive conversations with my very good friends from New York and Long Island and in that area that are having to live with him in that space and in the media and all those things. But I also know that there has been a deepening of the weaponization of the processes and the policies of government over the last few years. And frankly, I think expulsion and impeachment have become sort of the new censure. It used to be in the day. In fact, I was here, when Charlie Rangel was censured, it was serious. I mean, it was somber. It was really heartfelt. And now it just seems like this has become far more commonplace. And frankly, for once, I'd like to have a boring week in Washington where we actually legislated. That would be helpful. We haven't been doing a whole lot of that lately, and it's all been more personal and vendettas and pinched fingers and massive egos, it seems. And we got to get back to serving the American people.
I have been asking, Congressman, if this leads to, a new era of expulsion votes. That's going to be, to your point, that's going to be the new weapon. Every time somebody says something that someone doesn't like, we go through the expulsion vote, watering things down. You could argue the way impeachment has been watered down. But it's important to know you're down to 434 members again. You've got a very slim margin as a Republican majority, and you testified before the Budget Committee recently in support of your Fiscal Commission Act to save Social Security from a massive cut in the next decade. How do you get anything like that done on a serious level when it comes to policy and spending with such a thin majority?
Yeah, well, here's the real truth of the matter is, something like that is not going to happen on a partisan vote line. That has to be bipartisan. It has to be bicameral, meaning both the House and the Senate have to agree on a direction. And that's why I'm actually very, very encouraged by what happened earlier this week with our hearing in the Budget Committee. My bill and I'm paired up with Scott Peters, a Democrat from California. We chair something called the BFF, the Bipartisan Fiscal Forum. And we're very focused in on our debt and our spending and the deficits that have been created. There was another bill that had been introduced by Ed Case, a Democrat out of Hawaii, and Steve Womack, who is a congressman out of Arkansas. That bill was discussed as well. But it was really more broad themed than that. And then after us, the next panel that came in was Mitt Romney. And they have introduced language in the Senate that's modeled on the bill that Scott and I introduced. And we've been working very closely with them. And here's what I do know. In a hyper-partisan era right now, this is going to be maybe even harder than what it had been back in the 80s when Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill and others were working on these issues. But I also know that with our debt, $33.8 trillion with a T, and the interest on that debt now outstripping what we are spending on every program that deals with women and children, almost eclipsing every dollar that we spend on the Defense Department. It is crowding out, that interest payment is crowding out our other priorities. And that's what I'm hoping is going to allow Republicans and Democrats to get together and say, you know what, enough is enough. We've got to figure out how we save this system, because this isn't a Republican saying this or a Democrat saying this. This is the trustees of the trust fund for Social Security that says in 9 years, if we do not have a solution to this, there will be an automatic 23% cut to every single payment. And guess what? I might be okay. You might be okay when in our later years. I turn 55 next
Understood.
month. You know, I got a little bit of runway here. But guess what? I went to high school with people that don't.
You're still a young man, Congressman, and you're grabbing the third rail. I appreciate your coming on to talk to us about it, including your vote today. Bill Huizenga, I'm Joe Matthew. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
And a very happy Friday, everybody. The first day of December, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, streaming on YouTube and, of course, on Bloomberg Originals. It is December 1st. Tim is off today. Bloomberg News equities reporter Bailey Lipschultz in the house on an interesting day. Jay Powell speaks and the markets react.
And we are seeing a rally after a strong November, second best November since the 80s, Carol.
Long time,
starting
right?
off with a rally in the equal weighted index.
Equities up, and we see yields down again. So, my God, pivot, should we? I don't know. We're going to get into that because Jay Powell reminding us, maybe, we're going to keep a watch. Don't necessarily factor in rate cuts so soon. Anyway, we're going to talk to our Mike McKee in just a moment on that. Also ahead this year, no doubt about it, there have been two major themes, I think it's safe to say. Generative artificial intelligence, euphoria kicking off back in January. Well, one of the companies benefiting from the investment craze is Big Bear AI. It's up more than 160% so far this year, rallying another 4% today. We've got the CEO, Mandy Long, going to talk to her about a lot of stuff.
Interesting times to be in AI, especially as a public company.
Absolutely. And there's a fair short position on it, too, which is no surprise considering the run-up. Meantime, the other big theme, weight loss drugs. Pfizer shares, though, dropping today after its second weight loss setback this year. It was working on a pill, and it turns out, I guess, a pill is a little bit more tougher to do than a shot.
A little tougher when you have a lot of people getting sick and vomiting, nausea. Not really a good thing for someone to be taking twice a day.
Not what you want to see when you're doing trials and hoping for so much better. Hey, Tesla Cybertruck, dun-da-da-da, Katie Greifeld is happy. It's here. The cheapest model, going to set you back about $60K, but you're going to have to wait a couple of years.
Yeah, a lot going. But again, Carol,
what?
We're talking Powell, we're talking Fed, AI, weight loss drugs, Elon Musk. It's like a perfect storm
it's
for
like
2023.
a headline after a headline.
Exactly.
We're also going to talk about interesting story in the magazine. Chinese car sales are a big deal in Mexico. We'll get into that. And then I don't know if you've noticed, but it's been a pretty good year for Bitcoin, or actually I should say a good month for Bitcoin in particular.
Yeah, a lot of excitement around the ETF space and potential approval and what that means. Excited to see from our guest what he's expecting.
Yeah, Corey Clipston, CEO over at Swan Bitcoin. They help you buy it, manage it, and all that good stuff. So we'll see what he has to say about 2024, what the year may hold. We're also going to check in with David Weston a little bit later on what's coming up in Wall Street Week. Having said that, watching the market, stocks just off their highs. We've got yields lower. Let's head over to our TV colleagues. Countdown to the close starts now.
Countdown to the close. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage ahead of the U.S. market close starts right now.
This is the countdown to the close. Romaine Bostick alongside Katie Greifeld, joined right now by our colleagues Carol Masser and Bailey Lipschultz. Bailey filling in today for Tim Stenevec. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms here on the last trading day of the week, first trading day of the month. And when I'm looking at the biggest gainers in this market right now, Carol, it's not big tech. It's Boston Properties, it's Ulta Beauty, and it's Paramount.
Interesting to see. We've had a lot of strategists come on and say, hey, listen, what we're going to see in the market, it's not just about the big seven, right? The Magnificent Seven. It's going to be a broadening out. We've certainly seen that in the small cap space. In fact, Romaine, I feel like it's just for you. Later on, some of my gainers are a lot of small cap names. But we've really seen some big moves for fundamental reasons in many of the cases, but nonetheless, a broadening out in terms of gains. Having said that, there is still, though, I feel like more and more stories about the pressures that are on consumers as they continue to kind of deal with that higher rate environment. Having said that, I thought it was an interesting story in the Wall Street Journal talking about Apple and Paramount talking about bundling their streaming services together at a discount. And apparently, we've got Netflix and Max. They are apparently doing it as a part of Verizon. The Wall Street reported on that back in November. So it's just interesting, Bailey, what companies are trying to do to make sure that consumers don't cut back completely, but maybe kind of stay
Consumers
engaged.
love bundles, right?
Well, remember the thing called cable? Exactly. I mean, we're bringing it back. And the thing that stood out to me, Carol, from this story is really interesting that they were laying out the kind of analytics behind the fact that consumers are less likely to cut platforms out of their spending if it's bundled. So maybe you are paying up for Apple TV Plus because you're a big fan of Ted Lasso. Well, when that show ends and you finish binge watching it, if you're still paying for Paramount Plus and Yellowstone's on, at least you can kind of pivot to that.
It's like cable was onto something, can I just say?
Well, I mean, cable was onto something until it basically just ruined it all and ruined the experience. And now I kind of feel like we're circling back to that. So maybe they do it better this time around, and they make it, or they keep it in a somewhat affordable aspect. And more importantly, make the ease of use, because remember, that was kind of the other issue with cable as well. And I think you see so much disparity now with these streaming services. You need some consolidation. They need to do more than bundling. They just need to start buying up some of these companies.
I have a really great segue. So that is a full circle moment. Let's talk about another full circle moment. As it relates to the Cybertruck, Romaine, you weren't here, but we spent a lot of time talking about this yesterday. Tesla is selling a $55 OMFG shattered Cybertruck decal. Apparently, it's sold out pretty quickly, and of course, this is a nod to what happened in November 2019 when Elon Musk asked rather design chief to throw a metal ball from one of the windows.
Yeah,
and
there's a big metal ball, and so you now get a decal. But I mean, can you just save the $55 and just throw a metal ball at your window and just
maybe a metal ball would work? But of course, that same design chief, he actually threw another ball at the window yesterday during the
that was
launch
a Nerf
event.
ball, or
but no, it was a baseball.
A baseball, so it wasn't a metal ball.
Exactly.
Okay, so he threw a ball of some sort, and it did not break this time.
No, it
did they
worked.
shoot? And I was not here, but I heard they like shot bow and arrows at it, or like an Uzi or something.
At least it wasn't a flamethrower. What I love is Elon Musk and his ability to create merch out of his world, right? There was the $500 flamethrower from his Boring Company. There was the perfume. There were the short shorts. Remember them?
The short shorts?
The short shorts. $69. No, $69.42. Remember when he talked about
right.
$420 per price to his company?
Yeah, he's exhausting.
This got me playing around on the Tesla shop. You can buy a Cyber Whistle for $70 that is a stainless steel version of the Cybertruck. And guys, they have a Tesla and chill blanket for $220.
No.
P.T. Barnum is smiling, looking down, or maybe looking up and smiling.
They also have a Cybertruck for kids, $1,500. I mean, they're selling it to
$1,500?
Yeah, $1,500.
Do I need a subscription to unlock all the features on that, or what?
Well, it's out of stock though. So
wonderful. How many do they make of those? 12,
It is the holiday
13?
season, so burnt hair perfume that he was offering that makes you stand out in a crowd. Maybe that's the perfect gift under the Christmas tree.
Great.
On that note.
On that note, see you all later. That's a wrap for our cross-platform radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We're going to count you down to this Friday. We'll see you at 4 p.m. Wall Street time. I could see you in some short shorts.
Can she still hear me?
Can I say that, or is that an HR violation?
We'll find out.
All right. See you later, guys.
So many tears I cried, so much pain inside.
All right, enough of this silliness. Let's get back to what the week has really been about, and that is, I feel like, the Treasury yields, what we have seen, the movement. Bailey, this week has all been about economic data, softness, inflation concerns, I feel like reducing, and then we, of course, had Jay Powell today, who kind of, I feel like, threw some water on this idea of, hey, guys, don't get too excited about rate cuts. Rate cuts.
He really seemed to be walking that line, trying to stick to his book of balancing out, like, don't let the market get ahead of its skis, even though we're seeing a number of rate cuts being priced in for 2024, really trying to talk that down.
Here's what Jay Powell had to say earlier today. Jay Powell? Do we have it? It's okay if we don't. Basically, it's Friday, guys. There's just some gremlins around here. Basically, he signaled the Fed will possibly leave interest rates steady this month, but he did retain the option to hike further. So let's get into it, because we've got a great roundtable. Jay, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to wait. All right, we do have Jay Powell. Let's listen up, everybody.
It would be premature to conclude with confidence that we have achieved a sufficiently restrictive stance or to speculate on when policy might ease. We are prepared to tighten policy further if it becomes appropriate to do so.
All right, Jay Powell, of course, chair of the Fed, earlier today. Let's get to it, though. Bloomberg News Federal Reserve and economics reporter Katerina Saraiva. She's on Zoom in our Houston bureau. And then in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, our own Mike McKee, of course, Bloomberg News international economics and policy correspondent. All right, we had some issues, but it seems like Jay Powell was doing just fine today. Mike, what do you make of what he had to say?
Well, the cut you just played was not the news of the day. That was already priced in coming into this. People expected Powell to say that they were going to leave their option for raising rates on the table. He used a phrase he had not used before, though, when he said that the Fed target rate is, quote, well into restrictive territory. That was the line that convinced everybody that what Powell was really saying is not only are we not going to raise rates on December 13th, we are done, barring any kind of major shakeup in the inflation
Hence the
data.
market reaction.
Hence the market reaction, and why we're seeing people price in so aggressively, additionally aggressively, rate cuts. We're looking at now more than one rate cut priced in for May, 2 rate cuts priced in for June, 3 for July. By the time we get to January of next year, almost 6. So we're looking at almost 150 basis points of cuts coming very rapidly, and that was not what was seen last week at this time.
Well, and Katerina, I guess, is that realistic, just pricing in, and we've heard the Fed continue to beat the drum on higher for longer and wait and see?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't presume to, say whether the market's right or wrong in assuming this. But I mean, Mike's right. We are getting a pretty clear signal from Fed leaders. And, this week, kind of critically, it wasn't just Powell, but some of the more hawkish members that gave this sort of signal that we're at probably the peak of this tightening cycle, and the next move may well be a cut instead of another hike.
What does it mean, though, Mike, for him to really have such conviction, it feels like, and to kind of almost, put an end to any questions out there, to kind of clear kind of any kind of confusion, I feel like?
It does really tell you that the Fed has kind of changed their view as a group over the month. At the beginning of the month, when he had his news conference after the Fed meeting and then spoke a couple of days later, he basically said, we're not that tight yet. Now he's saying we're well into excessive territory. And so he's saying, we think what we have now is enough to slow the economy. And he went on to say that growth in spending and output is going to slow because these high rates are weighing on the economy. Where he can't go from here is to say how long that has to last. The restrictive territory has to last. They want people to buy the idea of higher for longer. And as I was saying earlier this week on the show here, it becomes a question now of how fast you think inflation will go down, because the Fed may want to balance out higher real rates. And so that is why the markets are really pricing in the Fed moving, is they think inflation is going to come down faster, with the exception of there's a group of people who still think we're going to see a recession, in which case the Fed would cut sooner and faster.
Katerina, come on in on inflation. We've had some guests come on and say that, actually just this week, I think it was Bill Smead who talked about that he thought inflation's going to settle, or maybe it was the guest yesterday, forgive me, Bill, 3%, and the Fed will kind of be okay with that. Should we assume that 2%, that target, still sticks?
I mean, that's what we've heard from all of them, right? That's kind of a unifying message and has been over the past couple of years. They're very, at least they say they're very adamant about 2%. And I
Does
think
it matter, guys? 2-3%? Does it matter?
I mean, I think it does for their credibility, honestly, and for the future of the Fed as an institution, right? If they want to have the kind of firepower that they have had over the past year and a half, in taming inflation, I think they really need to get down to that 2% level. Because otherwise, in the future, if we have another bout of high inflation, people will say, well, maybe this time they'll be fine with it going to 4%, right? So I do think it is pretty critical.
Mike, what do you think?
Well, they're looking always for what the quote-unquote neutral rate is, which is how the level of interest rates that would neither stimulate nor hold back the economy. And they don't know what that level is. It's what, if you want to get wonky, they call R star. And they've come to the conclusion over the last 10 years or so that the R star moves. And so at this point, to change the inflation target would require them to have a better idea of where this neutral rate is. And because of the pandemic, there's a lot of questions about whether it has gone up, whether it's actually going down. And so it's not something they want to get into right now, and they may not. They do another review of their policy framework in 2025, and so that would be probably when they would look at the question.
And Mike, is core really the only thing the Fed cares about? Because I've talked to a number of strategists and investors who keep pointing to wage growth and how that could be a potential.
Well, people look at wage growth and other inputs into what ends up as core. If wage growth is high, then the assumption is companies are going to raise prices to offset that. We didn't really see too much of that in this last round. We saw inflation for supply chain reasons. But that's one reason people are still looking at wage growth and how tight the labor market is, whether there are going to be pressures for higher wages that then lead to higher prices. Right now, it is the core rate, the PCE core rate that the Fed follows most closely in terms of trying to tell them what inflation is doing. The headline rate for PCE is their official target. But they look at core because they know with food and energy, it bounces around a lot.
Hey, I'm curious, guys, because 1 week from today, we'll be all over the jobs report. And Katerina, I'm sure there's tons of data points that continue to come to the Federal Reserve. Is there, and there's obviously weekly jobless claims and so on and so forth, but I'm wondering, does Jay Powell have a good feel of what that jobs report might be at this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think we can all, we'd be pretty safe in assuming that we're going to see another decently strong month, probably a continued kind of slowdown of what we've been seeing over the past few months. I don't think anyone is expecting really a surprise on any part of it. So I would think that that's probably where the Fed is. They've been encouraged by that ratio between vacancies and people looking for jobs coming down. So I think that's been a good indicator for them.
Mike, got about 20 seconds. Final thoughts?
Well, I think if you want to spin ahead to next Friday and jobs, remember you're going to take about 30,000 jobs off the headline number because that's the auto workers coming back. So at 175,000 is the forecast, the consensus forecast now. You're looking at 140,000 or so, which is a slowdown from where we've been. We get that, the Fed will be happy.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Well, those bulls out there, they're pretty happy today, certainly on the equity side of things. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Bloomberg News Federal Reserve and economics reporter Katerina Saraiva out there in Houston. Michael McKee, Bloomberg News International Economics and Policy.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg, and we begin with a headline right off the Bloomberg Professional Service. Ford had a record month for F-150 Lightning sales in October, also set another record in November. This according to Ford CEO Jim Farley in a post on X. Ford shares are rallying right now by about 3%. And updating you on an earlier headline, Amazon ordered 3 SpaceX rocket launches for broadband. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing today. 38 minutes to go ahead of the trading before we wrap up this trading week. Wall Street did turn a blind eye on Jay Powell's attempt to curb bets on Fed rate cuts, with stocks and bonds climbing on speculation the Federal Reserve will stand pat this month and ease policy in 2024. Here's where we stand right now. We've got the S&P up 21, closed to session highs at 45.89. That is a gain of 0.5%. We've got the Dow up 237, up by 0.7%. NASDAQ up 59, gain there of 0.4%. 10-year yield 4.21%, with that 2-year 4.55%. Gold up 1.6%. $20.69 the ounce right now on spot gold. West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.2%, 74.32 a barrel on West Texas Intermediate crude. So, first trading day of the final month of 2023. What is ahead for the new year? Lauren Goodwin is Director of Portfolio Strategy at New York Life Insurance.
As we move through into Q1, I expect that the preference for, frankly, defensive allocation plays, large caps is one of them, defensive sectors, I really like infrastructure equity there. I think they're going to continue to gain ground because we're going to see more evidence that the data is slowing.
And you can hear more of the conversation with Lauren Goodwin on the Surveillance podcast. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts. Pfizer dropping development of an experimental weight loss pill due to side effects. Those side effects include nausea and vomiting. Pfizer shares down now by 5.4%. Recapping stocks higher. S&P up 21, up 0.5%. Cannot ignore the Russell 2000 today because it is surging 2.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Charlie's setting us up so well. As you mentioned, shares of Pfizer down more than 5% here. Their biggest intraday loss in more than 3.5 years. And it turns out not so easy turning out a weight loss drug. And we did have news earlier today. Pfizer dropping development of a twice-daily version of its obesity pill. There were a bunch of side effects. So let's get to it. On the beat with us, Bloomberg News health reporter Madison Mueller. She's back here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio, here with Bailey and myself. So, all right, what do we know about this?
Yes, so Pfizer has been developing a twice daily weight loss pill. And what happened? A pill. Okay. So that's, which we've talked about before. Pfizer, AstraZeneca, some of the drug makers that are not yet in this space but want to be, because all of the pharmaceutical companies want to be, are looking to pills, as an inroad into this market, because there's only one pill on the market right now. It's a pill version of Ozempic, and it's not very good for weight loss. So this is an opportunity for other drug makers to get in this space. And that's what Pfizer sees, especially as Pfizer has really taken a hit this year as demand for its COVID products, its COVID shot, have sort of faded. It's looking toward the next big thing, that being weight loss.
It's down 43% this year.
Yeah.
The opposite of Novo, which is up 49%, and Lilly, which is up closer to 60.
Right. Yeah, we're definitely seeing a shift in the weight of COVID to weight loss.
Pun intended.
What's crazy is Pfizer is massive. It's a $162 billion market cap. And that, I get it. They're always doing a lot of R&D and looking for those, blockbuster drugs. Having said that, did they really just bet so much on COVID that it was going to keep kind of the revenue engine going?
Yeah, and I mean, they've looked at other infectious disease like RSV, and they're investing more in cancer, but it's not giving the same lift that COVID did, and like these weight loss drugs now are doing for these other companies. So, and what we've seen is the market is reacting so much to all of the news about these weight loss drugs. Every time there's a new study out, there's ripple effects, to far-reaching industries.
Either AI or weight loss drugs this year.
Right. It's just very disruptive, and so to have a negative result is something that the company doesn't want to see, investors don't want to see, and that is what we saw with this twice daily pill in this study, is that there were so many side effects that over half of the patients in the trial had to stop taking it.
And is this a space they have to be in? Because they still have a single dose daily drug they're studying, right?
Right, exactly. And so that's sort of what they're pinning their hopes on now. We're going to get data from that once daily pill study in the first half of 2024, and we'll see what happens with that.
If it doesn't work, do they have to acquire a company? Because they're still trying to acquire Seagen, right? That's a big deal in the cancer space.
And that's the thing. Some companies are looking to their own pipelines to see what they can advance forward. The analysts that I've spoken to have said that when it comes to Pfizer, they probably will have to do some M&A or have to acquire some company in order to bring a viable asset into their pipeline, which the good news for them there is there are so many small biotech companies now that are developing pretty innovative products. Biotechs really see this as a space where they can potentially benefit, and so there are options out there.
But how much are they behind, though? If they buy a company that's in phase 1 study, so very early stage, are they still trying to catch up to Lilly, Novo, and others?
Yeah, and they are behind, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to be about what is the best product, because right now, the weight loss pills that Novo's developing are they're not easy to take. It's like you have to take it in the morning every single day before eating food and then wait 30 minutes to eat. So it's not exactly easier necessarily than a once a week shot. And what we've seen is just different side effects with the pills. They're not any less expensive right now, at least, than the shots. And so there is space for these other drug makers to get into this market, even if it's later, if their product is better at the end of the day.
It's interesting. There's a stock that's on my gainers list today, Altimmune, right? And it's rallying because they gave some top-line results, and they did a mid-stage trial of their GLP-1 therapy to treat obesity. So you're right. There's a lot of smaller players out there. Having said that, is it trickier in terms of a pill versus a shot?
Yeah, it is. It's harder. Even though pills are sort of, once you have the formula down, they're a little bit easier to manufacture, store, transport, but the science behind developing a pill is actually a little bit more difficult. And what we've seen with the pills so far is that they just don't cause as much weight loss as the shots do because of sort of how they're metabolized in the body. There are some more concerns about liver toxicity and things like that. So it's actually a little bit trickier to develop a pill.
But it's the holy grail, isn't it, for this?
I think that's how the drug makers see it. Yeah, exactly. Because, not everyone wants to take an injection every week or every day. So...
Well, have you gotten a sense from analysts and investors if they do see, just thinking, if I have to take a shot, but at least I'm losing far more weight, that weighs into the risk reward, no?
Yeah, that's what Eli Lilly thinks. They really still see a market in injectables for them, for their business. And they have said, even though Lilly has struggled with supply shortages primarily due to the injector pens that they use, and so pills for them is something that actually could help with their supply issues. But their executives are saying we are not waiting for a pill to sort of save us from these supply problems. We're investing billions of dollars now, and we still really see a market for these injectables.
Talk to us about your beat, because you just came back from Eli Lilly. You spent some time with them. Tell us, if you can, what you can share about the visit in this space.
Yeah, it's interesting because Lilly is one of the oldest pharmaceutical companies. They've been around for over 100 years. They really got their start commercializing insulin in 1923, so they've been in this diabetes space for forever, and that's why they're at them and Novo, 1923 commercialized insulin. So for a century, these drug makers have been head-to-head in diabetes, continuing to innovate, and that's sort of why that's why we are where we are today, with both of them being at the forefront of this weight loss market, because the science and the investment that they've put into diabetes has led to these weight loss drugs.
It makes so much sense, because if you think about, is it 40-50% of the population, right, that are either diabetic or pre-diabetic? It's just massive, and that's just, I think, the United States alone. So you understand why all of these drug companies have been in that space, because it's a massive market. But their continuation of R&D has led us to kind of where we are today.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, I don't know if everyone knows this, but Lilly is the company that had Prozac. And so it's interesting to hear Lilly talk about the comparison between Prozac and now their weight loss drug Zepbound, because they said, when we brought Prozac to market, there was a lot of stigma and controversy around depression, and people thought depression wasn't a real disease and that it was, something that could just be fixed with, making yourself feel better or whatever. Going for a walk outside didn't really, there was a lot of stigma.
Easy,
yeah, and they were saying same thing with obesity. So we're sort of like at the forefront, we were at the forefront of depression treatments and now obesity treatments, and trying to break the stigma around that is part of this as well.
Did you get a chance to ask them their thoughts on whether they're reshaping McDonald's business model and Krispy Kreme, and whether or not
Great question.
Yeah.
airlines are going to make more money because they require less fuel?
Yeah, I mean, they all kind of laugh it off, especially like the airlines comments and the Walmart comments. I think to these drug makers and to I've talked to a lot of the scientists that discovered these, peptides and gut hormones back in the 70s and 80s, and they're like, we never would have thought that this would have turned into what it is today. Back in the 70s and 80s, literally no one cared about what we were doing. And then now the CEO of Walmart is saying that it's affecting, the weight of baskets in stores. Like, this is unbelievable. But, that's science.
I think it also caught all of us off guard. You know, people also talking about apparel makers that, you're going to lose weight and you have to go out and, buy a new wardrobe and stuff. So it's kind of coming out in some very, very different ways.
Yeah.
Fascinating beat, fascinating story. Love hearing about it. And it sounds like Pfizer's not done yet.
Yeah, they're not done yet. We'll wait to see what happens in the first half of 2024, I guess.
One of our big themes, as I like to say, TBD about a lot of things right now in our world. All right, Carol Massar along with Bailey Lipschultz, Madison Muller, Bloomberg News health reporter, thank you so much. Let's head to D.C., where we find Nancy Lyons with World and National News in our 99.1 newsroom. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. The ceasefire in Gaza has ended and the fighting has resumed. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says they will, however, continue to work toward the release of the remaining hostages.
We remain intensely focused on getting everyone home, getting hostages back. It's something that I also worked on today. So we're still at this.
Blinken blames the resumption of the fighting on Hamas, failing to abide by terms of the truce. Sandra Day O'Connor has died at the age of 93. She was the first woman to serve on the nation's highest court. Loyola Law professor Laurie Levinson says she leaves a legacy.
I think Sandra Day O'Connor will be remembered as a trailblazer, as the first woman on the Supreme Court, as somebody who was very dedicated throughout her years to civic education, as somebody who was not a pushover, as somebody who had legislative experience, and who on the court could very well navigate her position.
O'Connor died in Phoenix from complications related to advanced dementia and a respiratory illness. Well, it's another legal setback for former President Donald Trump.
A federal appeals court in the nation's capital says the former president is not immune from lawsuits over his role in the January 6th attack. Trump's team had argued he couldn't be sued because he was president at the time. The appeals panel says Trump can try to claim immunity later in the case, but not at this early stage. The former president's defense team is also arguing he's entitled to immunity from prosecution. That sets up another legal fight over whether Trump's actions on January 6th fall under the umbrella of official presidential duties. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nancy Lyons. This is Bloomberg.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 3:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We have got the Dow, the NASDAQ, and S&P 500 index all moving higher, but the Russell 2000 surging by 2.6%. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. stocks with a bid today, with the Dow currently up 256 points. S&P's gained 23, and NASDAQ is higher by 0.5%. The U.S. 10-year yield falls to 4.21%. Gold is up 33. Oil is in the red, and Bitcoin is higher by 2.7%. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were real estate and the industrials. Only telecom was in the red, and leaders to the upside in the Dow, Salesforce, Walgreens, and Nike, while Intel, Walmart, and Microsoft led to the downside. After earnings, Ulta Beauty rose 11%, and regarding the Fed, Powell said the Fed is prepared to tighten more if it becomes appropriate. In other news, Pfizer fell as much as 7% to its lowest level since 2020 after dropping its obesity drug. And wrapping things up, Chipotle traded to a new all-time high. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill Maloney, and to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg. Type Squawk, SQUA, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
It's
the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, just about 18 minutes left in today's trading session. And I'm not sure if you saw this, Bailey, but Bloomberg opinion columnist, former CEO of PIMCO, Mohamed El-Arian, writes today on the Bloomberg on how uncertainty looms over this November to remember. More specifically, how investors and analysts risk underestimating the challenges ahead during the period of understandable market euphoria. I mean, it's been quite a run-up in November.
Fascinating piece from Mr. El-Arian. The interesting thing, Carol, to your point, we saw the Dow, S&P, Russell all up about 9%. ARK, remember ARK had its best month on percentage basis ever. 31%. I mean, massive rallies.
Crypto's up.
Bitcoin is continuing to rally. And we started off today pretty red hot.
I'm curious what our next guest has to say.
I know, and with that in mind, let's get to the drive to the close with Carol Schleif. She is the CIO at BMO Family Office, back with us in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio. Carol, how are you doing?
Great. It's lovely to be here, and I love to see the activity in downtown New York.
It is nice, right?
It's really great.
It feels like the city is back in a big way.
Especially on a Friday. I feel like my commute was
busy?
Ghost town this morning. But then I get to the city, coming from the New Jersey suburbs, and I get here and everyone...
There are a lot of tourists here for the weekend. Christmas in New York, what's not to love?
It's the best.
They just lit up the tree? Yeah.
Well, so let's, Mohamed El-Arian seems to be a little like, don't get ahead of yourself. How do you feel about that? Do you agree with him?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with him. And especially it was listening to the lead-in about Powell saying we may not be done and we're going to keep them high, and yet the market's like, oh no, they're done. We're off to the races.
I'm a little confused by that again.
I actually think the only analogy I can come with is when my teenagers would go, Mom didn't say no, she said maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe means yes.
Yeah, I was going to say with that in mind, so that's more of like, because he was balanced, that inherently is dovish.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the markets being discounting mechanisms and looking ahead are really trying to get towards that end game. We think it's premature. We do think they'll start to cut at some point next year, definitely not in the first quarter. And there's a lot of issues.
Could be first half, though?
My own suspicion, our house view is we're not going to peg it that close, but my suspicion is it's later in the year, because Chairman Powell can't be very happy with the fact that the 10-year came from 5 and is down now flirting with 4.2, because they need thing, they still need that inflation. The core inflation is still running at twice what they want it to run.
I laugh because I feel like I've certainly been talking about this to other people. I'm like, don't worry, you'll get to, refinance it. Like all of a sudden we're watching like rates come down, and I do wonder what kind of activity will come out of this.
And I do think, because when you look at the demographics of it, there's a whole bunch of pent-up demand demographically, and if you could get the prices of the houses to come down, because a year and a half ago, if you had said, we suspect they'll see a huge uptick if mortgage rates hit 6%, but right now, if they hit 6 or 6.5%, I think you would get a lot of people coming out of the margins, because there's a, when you get to the point where you start having kids, or you have more kids, and you outgrow the house, and you want to be a bit
Billy, you bought a house.
I just bought it 6 1/8 and felt like an idiot at the time, but now I feel like a genius.
Well,
or lucky, I guess. I don't really have control.
I mean, here
over
I'm dating myself. My first mortgage was 12%, and a year later, I thought I died and went to heaven when I got to refinance at 8%.
Do we get anywhere near 5 rate cuts next year, like the market's pricing in?
I don't know if we get 5 rate cuts, but I think what the market will focus on is not the number, but the trend and the fact. And I think that's what the markets are really keying in on. But they got a bit ahead of themselves, we suspect, just especially in the near term, both stock and bond markets, with the exuberance you've got, because you do have a lot of headwinds that you're facing. And by the time we get to January, February, we're still facing, again, can we keep the government open top to bottom?
Do you think a recession's part of this? And I guess my other question is, can we have a recession with a decent job market? And then is it a different type of recession, which maybe is still supportive?
See, we've never
bullish trade.
Yeah, we've never been in the recession camp. We said soft landing from the beginning on, and continued to talk about that. And actually, when the whole rest of the world jumped on soft landing, we were like, oh, but there's a whole lot of things out there now that might make this a little rocky. But you do have the underpinnings. The thing that goes unrecognized a lot is we have so much fiscal stimulus coming into the system still. Now, if that were to get reversed because you had regime change, if you will, in terms of after the elections next year, and you started peeling some of that back, that could put pressure on it. And we do have to figure out how we're going to pay for all of it, because that, those concerns haven't gone away. They're a bit easier if you don't have 5% 10 years. You've got 4.2 in terms of refinancing the debt. But we were at the point where we were adding $1 trillion just to service the debt.
And one question I have looking ahead to next year, NASDAQ's returning 47% this year, S&P 22%, equal weight just 8%.
Right.
What does the market look like in 24, given the dispersion we saw in 23?
We do think you get more broadening out. You have to in order to sustain this.
We are already, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. And you saw it hinted at in the spring, because through May it was the Magnificent Seven, and then in June into July you had a broadening, and then you had 3 really bad months, and you're getting a bit more broadening. But to your question about recession, we have had rolling recessions underneath the surface, and we've seen periods like that before. And I think if you step back from it too, it's also indicative of the fact that when you've got secular change going on in the markets, in terms of, initially I think people thought we were going to go back to 0% neutral rate. We're not. That was the anomaly, was the last 10 or 12 years. And so when you go through a period where you're trying to reset expectations and anchor to new things, you get a lot of this rolling around like we had, where you get one trend that'll play for 4 to 6 weeks, and then it'll pull back and it'll go a different direction. But if we can get this leveling off in here, where the economy does okay, interest rates are reasonable, and people have pricing power. I mean, the key will be to watch too in the next couple months with what happens with the consumers, because when those credit card bills start coming due in January with all the headwinds, it's
that
real stuff.
all the buy now, pay later, which our intelligence analyst was saying that people feel confident that they can pay it off in the couple of months before rates, but it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is nerve-wracking, and I suppose if you get a December bonus and you're putting a few of that on to get them tucked away early,
you can take care of it.
But I've also heard a lot of the stories too about trying to get, the retailers are trying to get that spending early, because they're not sure people are going to be able to sustain it through the season. And it's been a long time since I've seen the 40, 50, 60% offers starting around Halloween, continuing, only through Black Friday. We'll extend it beyond. And,
I agree with you. The emails are continuing. Hey, real quickly, 25, 30 seconds. You like industrials, healthcare, technology. Technology, what do you like in technology? Just quickly, I'm curious.
I think they're figuring out the impact and where artificial intelligence is going to play as piece of it, cybersecurity, the build out of infrastructure. It's all undergirded with technology.
So it'll continue to be a theme next year.
Right.
No doubt about it. Thank you so. Do you have a last one?
No, I was just going to say, I guess, are you looking for like kind of tangential second, third derivative AI plays?
Yeah, I think so, especially because it's really interesting when you think through what will it do for diagnostic imaging, so you don't have a radiologist looking through.
I love that idea.
Screens. Yeah,
I think that's going to be powerful.
It's huge.
Carol Schleif, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Chief Investment Officer at BMO Family Office in studio. This is Bloomberg.
Your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Tim Sloan is suing Wells Fargo for more than $34 million, alleging the company illegally withheld years of unpaid compensation after he stepped down as CEO in 2019. Sloan is seeking to force Wells Fargo to honor multiple canceled stock awards on a bonus he says he was promised. This according to a complaint filed today in California State Court. He is also seeking damages for, among other things, emotional distress. Wells Fargo shares today, they are trading higher now by 1%. Elon Musk says if you are ever in an argument with another car, you'll win with a Cybertruck. That comment as Tesla started delivering the first vehicles to customers, the first Cybertrucks to customers. Dan Ives is with Wedbush Securities.
It's a historic moment. I mean, it's 4 years in the making, and I think the reason it's important in terms of this could be another growth vehicle for Musk and Tesla, and it also just shows what's happened. 313 area code, GM, Ford peeling back a little on EVs. Tesla is doubling down.
And Dan Ives, by the way, has a outperform rating on the stock with a price target of $310. Tesla shares, as of now, they are trading at just about $238. Tesla shares today down by about 0.8%. Cosmetics retailer Ulta Beauty reporting comparable sales growth in the third quarter that beat analyst estimates. We do have Ulta shares surging today by 10%. Those are our top company stories at this hour, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, getting ready to wrap up the Friday trade. Just about a little bit over 4 minutes left in today's trading session. We're going to head over to our TV colleagues in just a moment. Carol Messer along with Bailey Lipschultz. Bailey is in for Tim on this Friday. And what's interesting is we've been talking so much about the Cybertruck, Tesla Cybertruck. There is a story out on the Bloomberg that says Sixt, I guess is the company. I don't know.
New to me.
Yeah, new to me too. Sixt is phasing out Tesla electric cars from its fleet after the manufacturer's heavy price cuts hurt residual values at Europe's biggest car rental company. That's probably why we don't know about it. But it's like you do think about these price drops, right? And they've got these huge fleets, and now what are they worth?
Yeah, exactly. This is a company, according to the terminal, in the mobility service space, so vehicle rentals, car sharing, subscriptions, chauffeurs, the like. But Carol, also interesting in the article, calls out the fact that higher repair costs for EVs. So not only are they maybe not flipping those Teslas at the end of their life for a decent return given the price cuts, but it also costs more money apparently to maintain them.
I keep wondering about that, right? Because it's not like you go back to the dealer. Do you know, right? There's not really any dealer network. Well, there's places where you can buy them, but do you bring them back to those places?
I think you just punch in on the app and they pick it up.
And they just pick it up. Huh? You've been
New to
shopping
me.
for
That's,
Tesla?
I have
Well, what's interesting is I do feel like in the last couple of months, we have seen a real shift in the narrative around the EV space. We've talked about slowing EV demand in recent weeks. GM rethinking goals. Remember, they did that big buyback, $10 billion this week. Mercedes saying the EV price war was brutal and unsustainable. I will say for those, if you look at the high-end EV space, they're really expensive. So many consumers would say they need to come down in pricing.
In a number of those companies, when you look at the margin, and they're actually losing money per car sold. So it's really almost you're kind of stuck with a Sophie's choice of sorts, where you can either race to the bottom to compete while burning cash, or hope that you have enough high-end people who want to spend $80,000, $90,000 on a car.
Which is why Mary Barra had to kind of calm down investors, right? Because they know they're doing the spending, but she's still kind of, it sounds like, still on that EV trajectory, if you will. All right, guys, we're getting ready to wrap up the first day of trading in December, and we've got a rally underway, Bailey. A little bit of a, right? A little bit?
I mean, S&P back to the highest since March 2022. Nothing to complain about after
March 2022.
November. Yeah.
That's pretty significant. All right, guys, we're going to head over to our TV colleagues, count you down to the close on this Friday. Beyond the Bell. It starts right now.
Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic alongside Scarlett Fu. We're counting you down to the closing bell, and here to help take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast with our friends Carol Messer and Bailey Lipschultz in today for Tim Stenivek. Welcome to our audiences across our Bloomberg television, radio, and originals platforms, as well as our partnership. Carol, for those folks streaming on YouTube.
Yeah, for everybody who's out there, what a week it's been. It's really been about the rate environment this week, capped off by Jay Powell making some comments today that really makes it feel like pivot. Anyone, and that the Fed is maybe done. It'll make that meeting that's coming up in December even more interesting. Having said that, Bailey, we're looking at a broad-based rally today.
Broad-based rally. You're seeing the equal-weighted S&P outperforming the overall S&P by about 3 times, up 1.5% on the equal-weighted. So it does seem like we're seeing that breadth that analysts and investors have really been pounding the table for after months of Magnificent Seven being the only thing in town, the only thing really rallying.
Yeah, and almost 8 stocks higher for everyone that is down on the New York Stock Exchange. But really, if you chart it out, the outperformer on the day is the Russell 2000, up by almost 3%, getting ready to close out its 3rd straight weekly gain and 4th weekly gain in 5.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was also taking a look at the S&P 400 mid caps, which are also on a massive rally on the day, up 2.5%. We're talking about technical levels that have now been breached to the upside for all of these major indices here. And it really gets to the question right now about the legs for this rally and what the next catalyst could be.
Yeah, and if you're a technician right now, you're looking at something like the relative strength index on the S&P 500, and you're like, we are overbought in a big way, overbought in a big way. And so you do wonder whether or not we take a little bit of a breather at some point here.
Yeah, and we should point out, at least with the Russell and the mid caps, they're not quite into overbought territory. So maybe this is a little bit of course correcting from what we saw in the belly of the year. Let's walk you through the numbers here on the first trading day of December, last trading day of the week, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average higher by 294 points, or 0.8%. The S&P 500 higher by about 27 points, or 0.6%. A similar percentage move for the NASDAQ Composite, and as we were just talking about, the Russell 2000 going to close out the day higher by 3%.
I dare say Santa Claus rally, but maybe that's just too early. Let's not go there yet. Having said that, we talked about it being a broad-based rally on this Friday, Scarlett, and so we are looking at most names in the S&P 500, 437 gaining ground on this Friday, 65 to the downside, 1 unchanged.
And that is echoed in the sector performances as well. 24 industry groups. You've got 5 that are in the red, so that's quite 19 groups in the green, led by consumer durable and apparel. That's really VF Corp. Transportation, Romaine mentioned the Dow Transports Index. That is at the highest in about 3 months. And then the real estate investment trusts, which have done pretty well, up by more than 2%. On the downside, marginal losses in media and entertainment, insurance, and software and services.
All right, guys, let's get to some of the individual gainers, if I may, in the Friday trade. Altimmune is certainly a standout. At its highs today, up almost 86%. This after the drug developer gave top-line results from a mid-stage trial of its investigative GLP-1 therapy to treat obesity. Interesting. I'm kind of all in on small caps today, and this is certainly one of them. Jeffrey's calling the data solid. Stock did end the day, though, way off its highs of the session, still with about a 13% gain. Got another small cap for you. We're talking about the retailer Zumiez. Am I saying it right?
Zoomies.
I get it wrong every time.
Carol has a daughter. Do you go shop? Does she shop there? Have you been there? No? Yeah.
Sorry.
I would never say it. I've seen it in the mall.
Romaine gets his skateboards there, though, right?
That's right. I'm a big Zoomies guy.
Zumiez for the uninformed. Zoomies up about 12% in today's session. Small cap retailer forecasting net sales for the fourth quarter that beat the average of analyst estimates. B. Riley, by the way, raising its price target to 19 from 18, keeping its neutral rating. The stock, though, above that, 21 and change. Warner Brothers, interesting, top in the S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100 today, despite Goldman downgrading the stock to buy from conviction buy, so a slight downgrade there. No real clue on why it's rallying. New York Post yesterday talking about the CEO, David Zaslav, leaving the door open for ousted ex-CNN head Chris Lick to potentially come back, but I couldn't find any real...
Interesting.
I know. I was reaching. I love the Post. Anyway, Warner Brothers up about 8.4% today, and I got to do an honorable mention for Chipotle, hitting a new record high today.
It's like unstoppable.
I know. RBC raising its price target to $2,425 a share from $21 to $85. They maintain their perform. That stock, by the way, up 61% year to date and up about 1.4%.
And I just want to add another honorable mention there since we're now doing that. But I thought it was interesting to see all the real estate stocks that really get a strong bid. You had Vornado up like 14% here on the day. And I was taking a look at the Bloomberg office property index that we have on the terminal, 14% gain on the week. I guess that's directly tied to that massive drop in rates. Bailey?
Yeah, no, I think that's the big driver. And looking to the downside, though, worst performer in the S&P 500, Pfizer down more than 5%, wiping out over $8 billion in market cap. This coming after they scrapped their twice-a-day weight loss pill. Study showed a chunk of patients dropping out, things like nausea, vomiting, driving them to get out of that area and stop studying the twice-a-daily pill. They will continue studying a once-daily pill, but when you look at it, Pfizer down more than 40% year-to-date, guys. That compares to a 48% rally for Novo Nordisk and a 60% jump for Eli Lilly, who are absolutely dominating with the Ozempic, Wegovy, Zepbound, Mounjaro, those shots that pretty much everyone on social media is trying to get their hands on. Pfizer right now, seeming like a big loser after stopping that study.
You know, I just want to mention a quick decliner as well. It's Starbucks, although, like Carol, I'm not sure what's going on here. 10th day of losses for Starbucks? Have you guys noticed this? The longest losing streak since 2008.
That is kind of interesting.
I don't know. There's some labor problems, but I don't think that's the reason.
I don't know. What is it up?
Yeah, well, we were talking about that earlier on the program here. I mean, because when you look at just kind of the biggest names that have been dropping over the last a few days and weeks here, like I said, no real news on it, but again, it gives you some sense here of the sentiment in rotation.
Yeah, exactly. Some rotation moving around here. All right, so where do we want to go?
Well, let's we have to talk about yields, because
Yeah,
that
we
was
should.
really obviously the tail wagging the dog, particularly on the short end of the curve, and that massive drop that we saw on the 2-year yield, not only on the day, if you can put that up on the screen, but on a weekly basis as well. We talk about what it basically amounts to about a 13 basis point drop on the 2-year on the day. We're down something like 36-ish basis points on the week, and we're down about 60 basis points since we had, basically we're at that record high, or not record high, 17-year high, I should say, that we hit back in mid-October on the 2-year yield. So it's not just the flip-flop in sentiment, but it's just how fast. I mean, as one of our old colleagues, Taylor Riggs, would always say, it's about the rate of change, and the rate of change over the last couple of weeks has been insane.
Well, and it's really impacted the narrative in a big way, right? Like, I just feel like the conversations, although I do feel like that there's a fair amount of questions that are still out there about what happens in 2024, and I think there's still some concerns about maybe a little bit of a recession, or there's a lot of debate, you know, Bailey, I feel like with different guests about how many rate cuts there could be ultimately and when they happen. So I still feel like there's a fair amount of questions out there.
And right now we're seeing the market pricing in 5, which blows my mind for 2024, and a 73% chance
Talk about
we
a
get the
narrative
first one.
change.
Exactly. Such a talk about a pivot.
Yeah.
But how many people have we had? I don't know about it on your radio program, but I mean, we were just talking with Christina Hooper at Invesco. We had a couple other guests earlier this week who talked about this idea that you could have a scenario where multiple rate cuts in 2024 are justified, even though economic conditions won't necessarily be awful.
Well, yeah, I mean, it really depends where the Fed wants to go, and Jay Powell continues to stand by that higher for longer narrative, which the market has continued to shrug off, Romaine. So it'll be interesting to see, do we get a recession? Do we see economic tightening and how that plays out? But as you mentioned, you could see some cuts piling up.
You know, what's the thinking? Can I just ask you what's the thinking behind that? That they're saying rate cuts, even though the economy doesn't warrant it?
Well, I think the argument, at least I mean, I'm just going to quote what Christina was talking about as well as from others, the idea that you have sort of a restrictive policy right now, at least in the way the Fed views it. And the idea is that if they believe that inflation has been tamed, that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to be completely accommodative, but they need to bring it down from restrictive level to a neutral level. And I think their argument is that neutral level is below 5.5 where we're at right now.
We go back to R-star and how it should be lower than where it's at right now.
There you go. Look at that. Even Scarlett is just really confused by this. She's just choked up about it.
We talked about R-star though with Mike McKee, and he said
That's how I
you
feel
know,
every time I mention R-star.
well, it could be though a little bit of a moving number, right? Like it's not necessarily, you know, it could be a little bit higher than it's been at 2%. You know, that kind of balance rate of not stimulate.
But isn't that a good thing? I mean, you don't want the Fed to be too rigid. You want them to have some semblance of being able to pivot if they feel like the data or sort of other measures give them a sense
can you
here.
slap Scarlett on
I
the back
think
or
Scarlett
something?
will be
Make
doing
sure
all right.
she's okay.
She'll be fine. Don't worry. We got a whole team of people here.
I'm choked up. I'm choked up over R-star.
We keep a whole medical team around, mainly for me, because God knows I'm just going to have a heart attack any day now.
No.
So they're helping Scarlett out right now off camera.
Jeez, don't say that. All right.
I'm just going. Don't worry. I can
Both of
last.
you
I
are
can last through this
Bloomberg
simulcast.
treasures. Both of you are Bloomberg treasures.
Are we? Really?
Yeah.
What's that treasure worth?
Scarlett at least is. All right, guys. Stay healthy. Stay careful. Be well. We will see you again. That's a wrap. Our cross-platform coverage. Radio, TV. I love you guys. Radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We will see you again next week. All right, it's a little bit of a wacky day. Don't you think it's a little bit of a wacky day, Bailey?
It is a Friday. Friday at 4 o'clock for sure, Carol.
I need a Zoomies. Zoomies. You know, every time I say that name, I get it wrong. And they're like, really, Masser? Can't you just, like, figure this one out? One thing that has been figured out is finally the Cybertruck, Bailey. It is here.
It is here. It is hard to get your hands on one, though, Carol, if you kind of want to pay not an insane
The budget
price.
one?
Yeah, the cheaper option of the two if it were.
It's all relative. It's all relative. All right, let's get to it and how the investment and analyst world is reacting to it. With us is Ed Ludlow, co-host of Bloomberg Technology on Bloomberg TV. He's in our San Francisco bureau. Man, I don't know. You have been tracking this for a long time. What was it like to kind of watch the news, hear about the news yesterday? Success?
It was just a classic Elon Musk Tesla timeline. I mean, it happened in the end. It just happened late, many years behind schedule, and was astronomically more expensive than it was originally planned to be. I mean, that's how I would summarize it. I was there in 2019, right, in Hawthorne, Los Angeles, when they unveiled it. And on that day, I was standing next to a Tesla executive who I will leave unnamed. And I literally turned around over my shoulder and was like, this cannot be it. And here we are, 2023, and it actually looks like that. And I guess let's get into it. Bailey's point is key. Seriously, it's a lot more expensive than they initially said it would be.
Well, Ed, real question here. At what point, or who really wants to pay almost $100,000 to get a truck now when we've seen this play out with a number of Tesla models that they're going to lower the price anyway?
I don't think anyone has a good answer to that question. There are three variants of Cybertruck, right? The lowest end is the rear-wheel drive with 250 miles, and it's $60,990. And then at the other end of the extreme, you have the Cyber Beast. Let me say that with a radio voice. Cyber Beast.
Dun, dun, dun.
It's a Cyber Beast. That was pretty good. And you're right, it's almost $100,000. But here's the thing, like, we don't have a good handle on the pockets of demand out there for electric vehicles. This is at the cutting edge of technology. It is the highest voltage EV Tesla's ever made. It is made of unique and funky materials. It is edgy and has reinforced steel that is bulletproof, because you need that in a truck. And all
the soccer moms go to Whole Foods to buy their groceries, their organic, veggies.
Well, I know some pretty badass soccer mums. Am I allowed to say that on radio?
Well,
I think I am.
Too late, babe.
It's too late. But my point is that there is always going to be a first adopter audience out there, people that want to own the cutting edge of this technology. There are 1 million reservations for Cybertruck, but all you need for one is a $100 refundable deposit. And I think if you look at the sell side reaction, at least, a number of analysts are questioning the conversion rate. In other words, of those people in the line, 1 million of them, how many are actually going to see it through and buy the actual truck when it's ready?
Who's the buyer? I mean, America loves its trucks, but I'm trying to understand who exactly is, who's the market for this particular item?
God, but that's what I'm trying to say. I don't think anyone knows the answer, and that's not me judging the question. I've read every piece of research today that I can, and that's the question mark on the conversion rate. It's an expensive product, so the price premium will deflect from some potential buyers. I don't deflect's not the right word, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's not a truck that traditional pickup buyers are going to want, right? The reason that Ford went with the F-150 Lightning as a parallel example is that they just wanted to give an electric version of their best-selling product. In America, the pickup truck is sacred, as you point out. There are generations of people who buy the same brand and spec of pickup truck because their father did or their grandfather did. And I think what we all agree on is that the Cybertruck is not going for those people. It is going for a more niche audience in low volume.
Ed, am I crazy to almost not want to call this a truck, though? Just when you look at it, it doesn't fit your traditional truck build.
Yeah, gosh. 6 feet by 4 feet in the bed for you pickup enthusiasts out there. Is that a pickup truck? Don't know. It is edgy. The way that Elon Musk described it is that it's a better pickup truck than any other truck on the market, but it's also a better sports car than any other sports car on the market. That's verbatim what he said. 0 to 60 in 2.6 seconds, which is just crazy. But it also has up to 11,000 pounds of towing capacity, which is better than the F-150 Lightning and better than any other truck that's out there. So there's a utility to it as well.
What's the range on it?
So the range is staggered, right? 250 miles for that base model, which is not available until 2025. So you'll be waiting a while if you want the cheap one, $61,000 cheap. The Cyber Beast is 320 miles, and the all-wheel drive in the middle is 340 miles. But the secret that came out post-event, you can buy a range extender, which is For everyone watching on YouTube and those listening on radio, I'm holding up the width of my shoulders, a box. It's an external battery that you throw in the bed of the truck and plug in, and it can give you a maximum range of around 440 to 470 miles. You literally take another battery, which is in a box, and you put it in the back, and you plug it in, and it gives you more range.
And you better strap it down, because if it flies around in the car, that's not a good thing.
When we talk about this stuff, it's almost as if I'm making it up. I promise you I'm not. This is real.
Have you sat in it? Have you, well, tell me, I don't know what your access to it has been so far.
So I have not sat in one since 2019.
Yeah.
As Elon Musk knows, if you're listening, Elon, I'm desperate to get behind the wheel of one. I've asked many times. It was interesting. So what happened yesterday was they handed over the first dozen units or so to those early adopters, those VIP customers. And when I was doing this live on TV, I was like, hold on a minute. That's Alexis Ohanian, venture capitalist, Reddit founder, husband of Serena Williams. He was customer number 3. So, it was a VIP event, and it was very interesting to see it play out.
Ed, can we see, we know that they're changing the prices for these vehicles. 2025, I'm looking at the calendar, it's December 1st, 2023. Can they change the price? Can we see it go higher than 61 grand, basically?
Yeah, and look, gosh, this is not easy to explain. There's been a big pandemic since 2019. You guys probably caught that. And
Wait,
so
what?
The supply chain, yes, and there was a pandemic, and that has thrown the entire supply chain for this product in doubt. But I think everyone agrees that the end goal is to ramp up to higher volumes with those high-spec variants first, and at a later date introduce a more affordable, lower spec, which was the original plan set out in 2019.
Are they going to make money off of this?
Really good question. So there's this guy called Sandy Monroe, who's nicknamed the Teardown Titan.
Is this the guy you had on earlier on TV?
He's the guy we had on earlier.
What a great interview.
Thank you. He's a respected automotive engineer who takes vehicles apart. He hasn't done the Tesla teardown yet on the Cybertruck, but he's done every other Tesla car. And he said, I was on the assembly line, and his estimate is they're doing 60 jobs an hour. 60 jobs means they're making 60 Cybertrucks per hour on that line. They make about 90 per hour on the Model 3 or Model Y line. If you extrapolate that out, based on the capacity of the plant, he actually reckons they'll be doing 250,000 units a year within 12 months. Elon said they'll be doing 250,000 units run rate by 2025. So Sandy seems to think they're ahead of the curve. To answer your question, you make money when you get to volume. Those initial units, and while you're scaling, is not a profitable exercise, because you think about the kind of return on the manpower, energy, component costs to get those few units done. The margins are significantly lower, if not negative, relative to when you're building tens or hundreds of thousands.
I highly recommend. Go.
No, I was just saying, Ed, really quick question. The OMFG shattered decal, can that fit on a normal car? Or is that have to be on Cybertruck?
I was today days old, 1 day old, when I learned that a decal is just a sticker, and Tesla sold out of a $55 sticker. And yes, it fits on any car, but come on.
I want the flamethrower that Elon was pitching.
It basically just shows that Elon and Tesla could sell anything if they can sell a $55 decal to sold out.
I'm waiting for the pink version of the Cybertruck. You think that'll happen? Pink steel? No?
That'd be pretty cool.
Barbie version? I'm just
Bulletproof, so you're good.
Ed Ludlow, we love you. Check out that interview that was on their show earlier today and find it on their podcast feed. He's co-host of Bloomberg Technology in San Francisco.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It's 4:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Another winning week for the S&P 500 index, 5 in a row if you're keeping track. And yes, we are. That's what we do here at Bloomberg. On the week, up by about 0.8%. Wall Street today turned a blind eye to Jay Powell's attempt to curb bets on rate cuts. Stocks and bonds climbing on speculation the Fed will stay put this month and ease policy in 2024. So today, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all rallied, but the big story perhaps, the Russell 2000, that index of small cap shares, surged by 3% today. To put that in context, S&P was up by 0.6%. The Dow up 294 today, up 0.8%. S&P finishes the week heading into the weekend at 45.94. NASDAQ today up by about 0.5%. 10-year yield 4.21% with a 2-year 4.55%. Gold up 1.7%, $20.71 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down again today, another losing week, down 2.3%. West Texas Intermediate crude at 74.26 a barrel. On an update for the rest of the market, a couple of high-profile tech companies declined today after earnings. Dell was down 5.2%. Marvell Technology was down by 5.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. Carol Massar along with Bailey Lipschultz here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio on YouTube and Bloomberg Originals. So, have you looked at crypto assets?
Raging.
What's up with that?
Non-stop rallies. I mean, even you look at the strength, and this was before the market rally in November. We saw it popping off in the second half of October, going from about $27,000 a token to north of $34,000.
It's quite a pop, and I'm even just looking at the trade today. You know, Bitcoin's up, Ethereum's up, Cardano's up, Solana's up. If you look at the Bloomberg Galaxy Crypto Index, up 18% in November. Bitcoin up about 9% this past month, and it's at its highest level of the year. So quite a run.
Highest level since May of last year. So yeah, we're seeing it really continuing to hit its stride and trading back towards that $40,000 level.
Bloomberg writing that Bitcoin's chances of hitting $40,000 top of mind. Crypto speculators, they head into the final stretch of the year, so they're thinking, can it go even further? So something to kind of think about. There's a lot going on, though, and we are definitely see, as everybody expects, maybe the Fed is done, even thinking about rates cutting. The risk trade is definitely on. That includes crypto. So what might 2024 bring? So let's get to it with our next guest. Corey Clipston is CEO at Swan Bitcoin. It's the Bitcoin-only accumulation platform, and he is back with us on Zoom from LA. Corey, good to have you here with Bailey and myself. How are you?
I'm doing well, Carol, and thank you so much for having me on. And Bailey, nice to be here with you as well. I miss Tim. That's my usual guy, so say hi to him.
He is your guy. I will say hello. Talk to us about the activity you guys have been seeing as of late, especially as we've seen a move up, it feels like, across the board when it comes to crypto.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the good fortune to have customers who like to buy when the price is down as well, kind of the true believer crowd in the Bitcoin space, but absolutely influx of new users and big spike in volumes really over the last 2 months when you saw that rise that you guys were just talking about from 25 to call it 35, 36. And now it seems like we might have some legs. Feels very related to the latest round of news coming out of SEC whisperers about an ETF in January, but yeah, this move seems to have some legs up above 38K, heading to 40.
Yeah, and we saw Bloomberg Intelligence expects that ETF approvals will start in mid-January. Is that your expectation, and kind of how does that change the game for Bitcoin?
Yeah, it is probably my base case, is that window that now seems to have been narrowed to January 8th, 9th, 10th, something in there. And that seems to make a lot of sense given all the signals that we've gotten out of the SEC and folks in the know. And I think it changes quite a bit for Bitcoin. And primarily the story that I'm looking at is for the past 6 years, from 2017 through 2023, the top of funnel for people looking to get into Bitcoin has been extremely noisy, polluted by all of the crypto marketing schemes funded by $50 billion of venture capital trying to essentially market and dump crypto tokens. And now you're replacing that with signal coming from the largest, most trusted financial institutions on the globe, who are going to be talking about the real signal in the space, which is Bitcoin, very distinct from the rest of non-Bitcoin crypto. And that is now the top of funnel for Bitcoin. And it's a decent product. It's an IOU into an ETF. And it's kind of, it is paper Bitcoin, but it is backed. They have to buy the Bitcoin. It's not futures based. And I think that's a great top of funnel for people to get into Bitcoin. And then if they want to go a little deeper and explore it and hold more, what we've seen historically is that as people buy more and learn more, they take self-custody. And so they're going to graduate from that ETF product into holding real Bitcoin.
Corey, what do you know about who's buying, the demographics of actually crypto buyers, Bitcoin buyers in particular?
Yeah, so the buying public is, as you can imagine, very widespread. It's easier to make the pitch to Gen Z and millennials who aren't as encumbered by historical understandings and kind of received knowledge about the financial system. But then when you look at it from an actual dollars in, it obviously skews toward the boomers and the Gen X that actually have more money to be able to put in. So you see more customers coming from the youth of the country, but more dollars coming from those that are more established and have more money today.
How much more volume's up? You said you've noticed some significant trends, but give us an idea. Can you give us some numbers? I'm just curious about.
Yeah, sure.
Because it gives us an idea.
Absolutely.
You're kind of one of the, I kind of feel like ultimate risk trades. So it gives us an idea of kind of what's in investors' mind. Because we just had, what was it, money market funds, was it yesterday, hit a record high. So I'm just curious in trying to make sense of kind of the investment environment overall. Not apples to apples.
First, I think I do have to address this idea of Bitcoin being a risk-on trade, because that's counter to how it's being marketed by the ETF guys. They're talking about it as a safe haven and risk off, and so that narrative is being changed. And again, it's all around. It's not an inflation hedge in the terms of CPI, but it's an inflation hedge in the terms of monetary inflation. It's a hedge against printing more money, the original definition of inflation. So I think that is a really interesting thing to note. As far as volumes, up about 100%, I would say, in the last couple of months. If you kind of just looked at September versus November, which we're closing right now, it was probably up about 2x November over September.
Is there a risk that this can be a sell the news event, though, with so much excitement and that jump that we're talking about from October to now?
There is no such thing in any asset, including Bitcoin, of a straight walk up in a straight line to some price that everyone expects in the future, because people will always front run that and get exuberant, and then it'll always crash down. There has never been a large bull market swing in Bitcoin that hasn't had a pullback along the way of 40 or 50% down. So, I do believe that we are in the early stages of what is very likely, given macroeconomic factors and given domestic factors with the ETFs, et cetera, and just kind of more people understanding what Bitcoin is, that we'll see another big bull market at some time in the future. And I think it's very likely that it happens over the next couple of years. But during that, we will absolutely see big drawdowns too.
Corey, one of the things, we kicked off talking about the expectations for a U.S. spot Bitcoin ETF next year. And so that has certainly given some enthusiasm back to the market. But I also think about the legal overhang. And we got rid of two big things, SBF and FTX, and also Binance. Big deal, big settlement. I'm just curious, there's Kraken still out there, right? There's some legal concerns. I just wonder how you think about some of the legal woes or surprises that could still certainly creep up when it comes to this market.
Yeah, it seems that Bitcoin stands apart from everything that's been going on in the crypto space, right? Every single non-Bitcoin crypto runs the risk of being targeted as a security by the SEC in the United States, and any crypto platform that isn't playing by the rules, let's say, as they exist on the books, runs the risk of running afoul of AML KYC violations, money laundering, essentially, if they've been too loose with their customer onboarding and monitoring. Then it's very likely that they, whether purposefully or accidentally, have facilitated bad people doing bad things on their platform, as the DOJ has made very clear with respect to Binance.
So really, in your view, Bitcoin is insulated from those concerns and issues and bad actors, and that the clearing out is bullish for the token?
So if you're a Bitcoin-only company and you do things on the up and up, just like any other company, you don't really have to worry about these sorts of things. As far as Bitcoin as a monetary technology and payment rails, it's technology just like the dollar is technology, and bad people will do bad things with money. So they can use Bitcoin, they can use dollars, they can use euros, yuan, and yen to make transactions. There's nothing you can do about that. It's just technology. It's neutral.
What is, we just got about 30, 40 seconds left here, Corey, as we wrap up. As you look ahead to 2024, you sound optimistic. I hear it, no doubt about it. And it is your book. But what is it that you do get concerned about when it comes to the crypto environment? What is the one possible downside that maybe might be top of mind for you in just about 30, 40 seconds?
I mean, honestly, the most interesting challenge I'm really looking forward to taking on is to figure out how to talk to people about our frenemies, right? We're already being used. Our people are already giving webinars inside of these large TradFi firms, educating their people about Bitcoin as they ramp up their knowledge and their understanding. But at the same time, we sell a competing product with selling real Bitcoin while they sell paper Bitcoin. So I think just figuring out that dance and being kind of all on the same team, and rising tide lifts all boats, and knowing that this is going to be very good for our business, but also understanding that as people get more deeply educated and more financially invested in Bitcoin, they're going to want to own the real thing and not an IOU. And they're going to want to pay for it once instead of having to pay for it every year. I think that will be a winning message in the market as well.
All right. Well, listen, Happy New Year, happy holidays. I look forward to talking to you in 2024. Corey Clipston, of course, CEO at Swan Bitcoin, joining us from LA. Let's head out to DC. Another check on news. Roll the Nat with Nancy Lyons. Hey, Nance.
Thanks, Carol. The first woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court has died. Sandra Day O'Connor died early this morning from complications related to advanced dementia and a respiratory illness. She was 93. She was nominated to the court in 1981 by then-President Ronald Reagan. And during her confirmation hearing, she was asked her views on abortion.
My own view in the area of abortion is that I am opposed to it as a matter of birth control or otherwise.
O'Connor was confirmed by a unanimous vote. She retired in 2006 to nurse her husband, who had Alzheimer's. The House has voted to expel New York Republican George Santos.
On this vote, the yeas are 311, the nays are 114, with 2 recorded as present. 2/3 voting in the affirmative, the resolution is adopted, and a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
That's House Speaker Mike Johnson announcing the results. Congressman Bill Huizenga was against expulsion.
We have not, in the modern era, ever expelled anybody who has not been convicted of a crime, not accused, not even having a really strong trail. And let's be clear, I don't think George Santos is, let me be charitable, a high-quality individual. All right, let's leave it at that.
Huizenga spoke with Bloomberg Sound On. New York Governor Kathy Hochul will now need to call for a special election to fill the position. From expulsion to impeachment, House Republicans are preparing to formally authorize an impeachment inquiry against President Biden as soon as next week. The vote would require all House lawmakers to go on the record as supporting or opposing the vote. The impeachment inquiry was initiated without a House vote, which has led the White House to say the probe is, quote, lacking constitutional legitimacy. Global news 24 hours a day.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Yeah, it's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Another winning week for the S&P 500 index. 5 in a row. This week, the S&P was up another 0.8%. Today, we had the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all rallying. But the big story, the Russell 2000 surging today by 3%. S&P, to put it in context, up 0.6%, higher by 26 points, finishing the week, heading into the weekend at 45.94. The Dow up 294 points today, up by about 0.8%. The NASDAQ Composite Index up 78, up by about 0.5%. 10-year yield 4.20% with a 2-year yielding 4.55%. Gold up 1.7% to $20.71 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 2.1%, $74.39 a barrel. Bitcoin, a topic we were just discussing, surging 3% with a 38,000 handle now, closing in on 39,000. Bitcoin right now 38,867. So today, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advanced. Wall Street turned a blind eye to Jay Powell's attempt to curb bets on rate cuts. But the bigger question, how many rate cuts to expect next year? And that question for Carol Schleif, Chief Investment Officer at BMO Family Office, who is a guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
I don't know if we get 5 rate cuts, but I think what the market will focus on is not the number, but the trend and the fact. And I think that's what the markets are really keying in on. But they got a bit ahead of themselves, we suspect, just especially in the near term, both stock and bond markets with the exuberance you've got, because you do have a lot of headwinds that you're facing. And by the time we get to January, February, we're still facing, again, can we keep the government open top to bottom?
And you can hear more of that conversation on the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts. Cosmetics retailer Ulta Beauty, beautiful day there, reported forecast beating comparable sales growth in the third quarter, also raised the lower end of its full-year earnings per share forecast. Ulta up by 10.8%. So again, recapping, a move higher today for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. S&P up for a fifth week, advancing today by 0.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. Hey, Bailey, saw a story kind of was on my radar as I was getting ready to prep for this guest. Bezos Earth Fund, they're going to put $57 million into climate food solutions that include developing low-methane livestock to curb emissions of the potent greenhouse gas. Andy Jarvis is director of the Future of Food program, and he talked about this in a video interview from Dubai. Food systems, when it comes to, growing it, processing, distributing, consumed or thrown away, account for about a third of global greenhouse gas emissions. Much of that footprint is linked to livestock farming, a major source of methane, deforestation, and biodiversity loss. So it's a big contributor to climate change.
Big deal. And that's one of those things when you debate almond milk versus regular milk is almonds take a lot of water, but also there are a lot of things that come out of feeding and kind of milking a cow.
Yeah, and I feel like that was a later discussion, but livestock is really front and center. COP28 underway will be for the next couple of weeks. So with that in mind, we welcome in our guest, Benjamin Walcon. He's founding partner at Muse Climate Partners. It's a venture capital arm of Muse & Company. Its website says it invests at the convergence of climate solutions and high-tech applications. He's on Zoom in New York City. Ben, great to have you here. Tell us about your firm and your investment philosophy.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
At Muse Climate Partners, we're focused on areas where technology can help us decarbonize the economy faster. When we talk about the sectors that need to go to net zero, we're talking about electric power, transportation, buildings, industry, and agriculture. We need rapid scaling of technologies that can replace dirtier incumbents with cleaner solutions. And we're looking at investing in companies that can create those solutions in real time.
All right, so where have you been investing? What do you think are some of the top investment ideas that you've really been committing money to?
Well, right now we're really excited about the innovation that's happening in home heating. As we know, heating is a major cause of climate change. You have a lot of homes that are powered by gas and by oil, but there's this quiet revolution that's happening right now in heat pumps, electric efficient systems that are much lower emissions. We're really excited to be backing a company called Harvest Thermal, for example, that's not only deploying heat pumps, but pairing those with smart controls that can draw power from the grid when renewables are online and match clean energy supply to home energy demand. So that's one of those examples where analytics and advanced software can be paired with a known climate solution to make it even better, a better value proposition around it, and something that can scale more rapidly. So home heating is one thing that we're excited about, but there's a lot of other innovation across electric power and others.
I think this whole idea, is really interesting when you talk about what you guys are investing, kind of smart thermal, if you will, storage and heating. Having said that, how expensive is it for like a home to do it?
Well, it depends exactly on where you are. One thing that we're really excited about is IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act that passed a year ago, a little over a year ago, helps with incentives for homes. But even with or without IRA, the payback of it is actually quite rapid because you've reduced your energy bills so dramatically by having such a more efficient system in place.
So payback in 4 years, 5 years, 3 years, 2 years?
It really depends on where you are geographically.
Interesting. Well, Ben, I guess looking at your portfolio broadly, though, what stage are some of these companies in? Like, how big are they? Are they producing these products in a number of houses? Are they still kind of early stage and really more in like that study phase?
Yeah, in venture capital, the alphabet game has gotten a little bit jumbled where Series A, Series B, Series C could mean a lot of different things. So we try to be very specific and say that right now we're investing at the cusp of commercialization, which means we're investing when companies have a great team in place, a great early product in place, and they've either just signed up their first customers or they have credible, verifiable line of sight to those first customers, and they're looking for a funding round that can help them accelerate and scale.
Well, with the funding environment that we're in, it's difficult for companies to get cash. How has that changed for you guys putting money to work, just given where we are with rates as high as they are and the kind of dearth of offerings, both publicly and privately over the last 2 years?
I would say that we're sort of blown away by the resilience of climate tech. Even with everything that's happening in the broader market environment, there continues to be a great deal of enthusiasm around the space. A lot of new dry powder sort of popped up in the last 2 or 3 years, and that really catalyzed a lot of entrepreneurial talent coming into the space. People want to be working on this solution. They want to be building things that can help address climate change. So while I know there's some data out there saying on a quarter-to-quarter basis there might be some slowdowns, we're really seeing as much talent and as many opportunities in the space as we ever have.
Ben, what about the EV space? I mean, obviously we know all the big players. We've talked a lot about, Elon Musk today because of his Cybertruck, but nonetheless, there's, global manufacturers increasingly have ramped up EV offerings, but it does feel like the demand part of the equation has fallen off. And I feel like we were just talking about everybody kind of almost a tipping point, but it just feels like all of a sudden there's a pullback. What are you seeing in that space?
It's interesting because I have read those headlines, so I looked into the data, and every quarter so far in 2023 has had higher EV sales than that same quarter in 2022. And I think we're just shy of 4 million EV sales per quarter right now. So the market is growing, and you're hearing a number of individual automakers saying that they're hitting new records. I think the Ford F-150 Lightning was an example. So we're really excited about what we're seeing there. From our standpoint at Muse Climate Partners, we're looking at earlier stage opportunities. So, for example, we were an early investor in a company that's become the #1 electric farm tractor in the world. That's Monarch Tractor. And we're also looking at opportunities of AI applications that can help large corporations and large cities scale and manage their electric vehicle fleets.
Ben, we got about 45 seconds left here. Obviously, I think everyone can agree that climate change, getting away from fossil fuels, is a big next step. But getting to those materials for batteries, mining is poor, bad for the environment. What do you do with batteries afterwards? How do you strike a balance in terms of kind of cleaner energy, but with the costs that come to produce those goods?
Yeah, the entrepreneurial talent that's come to bear in climate tech is also focused on this. And at Muse Climate Partners, we've backed a couple of companies that are looking at the battery economy of the future. One of those is a company called Nth Cycle, which I believe has been featured in Bloomberg a number of times, which has made it a next-generation factory to reuse and reintroduce metals into the battery economy. We've looked at a number of others as well.
Well, come back soon. Love to continue this conversation. Ben Wolcon, he's founding partner at Muse Climate Partners, joining us on Zoom in New York City. Carol Masser, along with Bailey Lipschultz, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Tim Sloan is suing Wells Fargo for more than $34 million, alleging the company illegally withheld years of unpaid compensation after he stepped down as CEO in 2019. Sloan is seeking to force Wells Fargo to honor multiple canceled stock awards and a bonus he says he was promised. This according to a complaint filed today in California State Court. He's also seeking damages for, among other things, emotional distress. Wells Fargo shares did advance today by 1%. Pfizer moved lower after saying it is dropping development of an experimental weight loss pill due to side effects. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini.
Charlie, this is a blow to Pfizer's efforts to find new avenues for growth. More than half of patients in a mid-stage study had to stop taking the twice-daily drug because of nausea and vomiting. Weight loss shots made by Eli Lilly and rival Novo Nordisk are a gold mine that's propelled them to dizzying valuations and lured other drug makers into the field. Pfizer and UK drug maker AstraZeneca, they are seeing pills as a possible way to make inroads into the market, projected to reach $100 billion, Charlie, within 7 years.
And that's Denise Pellegrini reporting today. We saw Pfizer shares falling by 5.1%. Those are some of the top company stories at this hour. I'm Charlie Pellet, and this is Bloomberg.
Busy day to cap off a...
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio.
Busy day to cap a busy week. Bailey Lipschultz filling in for Tim Stenevec.
Just excited.
I know, I jumped the gun. You get excited.
I just want to get to
that.
Friday at 6 p.m. I know what's going on.
Almost going there. More Bloomberg Business Week will come, but first up, let's get a check on the latest world and national news with Nancy Lyons in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington. Nancy.
Thanks, Bailey. Sandra Day O'Connor has died at the age of 93. She was the first woman to serve on the U.S. Supreme Court. She spoke during the 2014 National Book Festival about her first days serving on the highest bench.
My hope was that I could do well enough that no one would be unhappy that they had a woman on the court. They wouldn't think that was a defect. That was very important to me. And that I could make a valuable, lasting contribution to the work of the court. I hoped I could.
O'Connor was being interviewed on C-SPAN about her book, Out of Order, Stories from the History of the Supreme Court. She died of complications from dementia and a respiratory illness. A federal appeals court has given the go-ahead for lawsuits to be brought against Donald Trump by Capitol police officers and Democratic lawmakers due to the Capitol riot. A 3-judge panel of the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals denied Trump's request to dismiss the lawsuits that accused him of inciting the violent mob. Well, you can call him former New York Congressman George Santos. The House today expelled Santos 311 to 114, well over the 2/3 majority needed. It was the third try to remove him for ethics questions, but this time the vote was taken after the House Ethics Committee released a report alleging that Santos engaged in theft and deceit regarding campaign funds. The fighting has resumed in Gaza after a 7-day pause to exchange hostages and prisoners. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is blaming Hamas for the end of the truce.
Hamas reneged on commitments it made. In fact, even before the pause came to an end, it committed an atrocious terrorist attack in Jerusalem, killing 3 people, wounding others, including Americans. It began firing rockets before the pause had ended, and as I said, it reneged on the commitments it made in terms of releasing certain hostages.
Blinken says they will continue to push for the release of more hostages. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nancy Lyons. Now back to you, Bailey and Carol.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Nancy Lyons in our D.C. Bureau. I want to go back to that story, Bailey, that Charlie talked about Tim Sloan, former CEO of Wells Fargo, suing Wells for more than $34 million. He's saying that the company illegally withheld years of unpaid compensation after he stepped down as CEO in 2019. I mean, this was a bank that it felt like there was just one problem after another, fake accounts, just issue after issue of improprieties that they did. And it's interesting. He got, I guess, caught in some of it.
Yeah, and reading through the Bloomberg report of it, saying that in his claims, in the suit, that those problems were before his tenure. He stepped in to fix those issues, Carol. I don't know.
He's at the company for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, he was CFO back in 2011 and then, kind of kept building his way up. I'm not saying that he wasn't aware, but it does speak to that larger argument about the C-suite. What do they know about what's going on at their company?
Exactly. And we see people suing for compensation. We don't see it happening with the former CEO of a $163 billion bank that is an institution here in America. That's what's really fascinating. And when you look at it, again, weeks of scandal involving those fake accounts. You had the other issues that kind of continued to pile up. You had the Federal Reserve imposed cap on growth that has still not been resolved. So many problems.
It was like one after another. I actually interviewed Tim Sloan for a Bloomberg event here, and we talked about some of it. What's interesting is he does claim in his suit specifically that the problems predated his tenure as CEO, that he worked to correct them as CEO when he took over. He said that no one on the board blamed him until they became the subject of political and media criticism after his departure from the bank. So, I don't know. We'll see. Remember, he took over after a scandal involving those fake customer accounts. John Stumpf, his predecessor, had run the bank since 2007. He stepped down amid a lot